Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So we are clearly in full holiday swing here in my household. I love the holidays and I was super excited to go ahead and decorate. I always start decorating the week after Thanksgiving, or the weekend after Thanksgiving. So yes, I am really excited about the month of December. But let's go ahead and wrap up the month of November. I actually read quite a few books this month, which was surprising to me. I didn't feel like I had as much time to read as I apparently did. So yeah, let's get started and I'll show you what I read in November. Alright, the first book that I read in the month of November is Scarlet, or was Scarlet. I actually started reading this in October, near the end of October, and then finished it in November. This is the second one in the Lunar Chronicles, and it's a fairy tale retelling of Little Red Riding Hood, or sort of, you know, it brings in elements of the fairy tale Little Red Riding Hood, with, you know, Scarlet being Little Red Riding Hood, and she wears a red hoodie to sort of, you know, mimic the red hood, and I liked Scarlet as a character. She's a very strong character. And it brings in like her grandmother and is missing, and then it brings in this character of Wolf, and I'm not going to spoil parts of Cinder by explaining Wolf at all, but if you've read the Lunar Chronicles, you know how he fits into the story. But so it's broken up into different perspectives. So you have, of course, Scarlet's perspective because it's Scarlet. But you still have Cinder's perspective, and as well as Kai's perspective. So it starts to break into more points of view and more chapter. You know, the chapters are dedicated to different characters, and when I feel like sometimes when there are too many characters' perspectives, the book starts to slow down, because Cinder only really had Cinder's perspective or Kai's perspective, and or Kaye, I don't know how to pronounce his name. If I'm saying it wrong, you can tell me in the down bar. You don't even want to know how I pronounce many of the Harry Potter characters along the way. But yeah, so I liked it, but I don't think I liked it as much as I liked Cinder. The next book I read was Forbidden Fires, and this is by Margaret Anderson, and this looks funny. Yes, I know. This is actually a like an advanced reader copy. It's a uncorrected page proof, and I have this because when I was in college I was part of a group of people that helped to get the author Carla J, who wrote The Lavender Menace. She went legally blind, and we'd done conference calls and worked with her in one of my classes, and she donated a ton, like her entire personal library, to my university, and there were some books that were left over that didn't make it into the collection, and some of the people from that class and from one of the clubs that I was in was given the opportunity to take some of the books home, and this is one of the ones that I took home because I'd never seen anything like this as far as like an uncorrected page proof. So I took this home, and I thought it was a fun way to read it, though a little bit confusing because it's clear that this is not how the book was finished off. But so this book is basically, I can't remember if it's a true story or if it's just sort of like a fictionalized version of her actual story, but it's about this woman who is sort of coming to understand, like it starts off with her as like a teenager, and she interacts with this woman, and she's not really sure that she's in love with her, but like she's entranced by her, and it sort of navigates her growing up and realizing that she has these really strong feelings, and sort of how she and that woman interact. It was a good picture of you know, how society at this time viewed lesbianism and viewed LGBT individuals. And so that was really interesting to see, because I feel like even in the time we're in now, there are definitely echoes of some of the stuff in here, because she basically, you know, fought against it and fought against it and fought against it, even though she felt the same way, it sort of felt like to me, about the main character. She wouldn't let herself feel that way because she had religious objections to it, And it was just an interesting exploration of the different schools of thought and human nature and love and things like that. So I really enjoyed reading this. It didn't read all that quick, and I think some of that lended to the uncorrected page-proof nature of it, because I don't think that this is how the book ended up being finished, because there's some things in here where it's like she's speaking French, but there's no translation, and it's not something that's easily translatable. And I know a fair amount of French, and I didn't know what some of the phrases meant, so that I found a little confusing. But overall, I thought this was a really good book, and it had definitely some things that really made you think, and the writing was really beautiful. So the next one that I read was Masked Balls and Other Stories by Alexander Dumas. And you know, I've been saying Dumas, and he's one of my favorite writers, but I actually think it's Dumas because it's French. So I feel a little bit like put my foot in my mouth over that, but yes. So this is a collection of short stories, and I think that they're actually things that happened to him. So instead of fiction, I think that these are him telling back stories that were told to him, because at some points in the story, somebody will refer to the narrator as Alexandra or as Dumas or something like that. So I think that they're actually stories that were told to him. It's funny that it's called A Masked Ball and Other Stories, because the story A Masked Ball is really, really short, and then a good half of the book, actually I think it's 60% of the book, is a story called The Elusive Bird. So I would have thought that the story would be called The Elusive Bird and Other Stories, but who knows how publishers name these things. I thought this was really interesting and fun. It's not my favorite Dumas reading. It's definitely, it read slower for sure. I mean, it still retains his really great detail and storytelling, but it read much slower than a lot of his fiction. And the story that took up the majority of the book, The Elusive Bird, it felt like, okay, get to the point, get to the point, get to the point. The first half of the story was like him chasing this bird, and like he chased it for 4 or 5 days, and he would go to sleep and he'd wake up and the bird would be exactly where it was. And I was like, this is so, that did not happen. And so I was getting frustrated with the story, but once we got past the part where the bird was, it got a little bit more interesting, and the ending of that one was really fun. I think my favorite in here was the Cabriolet Driver, which is about it's a cabriolet driver who ends up picking up, oh goodness, he's taking his master somewhere, and then some girl jumps off of a bridge, and his master saves him, or saves her, and it's the whole story about, it's like her story and how it connected to his story, and it's really interesting. I thought that was really cute. And then I also thought it's one about a ship. I can't remember what it was. It's not Mariana. The Cure of Boulogne was about, I guess it was he worked for the church. But anyways, he ends up on a ship, and it was a really interesting story about that. So I thought this one was fun. Definitely not one I would start with if you haven't read anything by Dumas or Dumas, whatever. But it's definitely a good one. Alright, so then the next book I read was actually the book that I unwrapped from Blind Date with a Book, which I will link so that you guys can check that out, because that's such a fun thing. And you can see the book that that my fiance Justin got, which he's actually reading right now. Wow, I cannot speak today. So I'll let you know what he thinks of that one in my December wrap-up. But so this was the book that I got in my Blind Date with a Book, and I was so excited because I have been wanting to read this book for so long, but I hadn't ever picked it up, and I hadn't actually seen it anywhere to pick up. But it's Ready Player One by Ernest Cline, and I just loved it. It was so good. Like, first of all, I love 80s pop culture and video game stuff, and so this was just like a dream come true because I was laughing at some of the references, and I got most of the references, And I mean, you don't necessarily need to know anything about those things to enjoy this, but I think that it definitely redoubles your enjoyment if you do know about that kind of stuff. And it was an epic tale about, so it's basically about this kid, and it's sort of set in the future where, you know, the real world is a mess and everybody basically lives their lives inside of this virtual reality called the Oasis. And the guy who created the Oasis, or one of the people who created the Oasis, dies, but he has no heirs, and so he leaves his fortune to the lucky player who can complete his trials. So he's set up this sort of like maze of things that you have to, like, sets of challenges and things you have to find in order to win his fortune and essentially be the owner of the Oasis. And he was a big lover of the 80s and of video games and pop culture, and so that's why there's so much of that, because the world becomes obsessed with the 80s and with video games and pop culture in order to try to figure out where to find these keys and gates. And it's fantastic because, you know, people have been searching for the first key of 3 for 6 years or 5 years or something like that. And then suddenly this high school kid with little to no means finds it, and what happens from there just goes sort of haywire. And it was incredible. And, you know, you have the big corporate villain, of course, and the friendships they're sort of created, but are, you know, they're competitors, so they can't be too close and they don't share everything. And it was really interesting because I felt like the relationship building didn't take away from sort of the quest aspect of it, but it just sort of added to it and made it more realistic. And it was a lot of fun, and I thought that the different challenges that they had to undertake were incredible, and some of them I think should exist in our video game, you know, reality. So that was really cool, and I definitely would recommend this to anyone. I have recommended it to several people. Justin's actually going to read it when he finishes the book he's currently reading, and then a friend of ours, I've told him that once Justin finishes it, I'll pass it on to him because it's right up his alley. So yeah, I definitely would recommend this. It was by far my favorite book I read in November, and that is all. But not quite all, because I did finish one more book in November, and that's Cress, the third one in the Lunar Chronicles. I say the last because the other book isn't out yet, or other 2 books. I don't remember how many are going to be in this series. This is the book that everybody says is the best in the Lunar Chronicles series. I still think Cinder was better, and that is my personal opinion. I did like Cress better than Scarlet because I really liked Cress. Like, I related to her and I thought she was fantastic. And I thought that the way that her sort of romantic scenario was created was really great and realistic. There was no like insta-love or weird, I don't know. I thought that some of the romance aspect in Scarlet was strange and didn't strike me as possible, whereas the way that Cinder's relationship develops is really fantastic and really believable and heartwarming, and I liked it a lot. Some of the crazy things thrown in the path of Cinder and her crew were really funny and crazy and interesting, and this is obviously a retelling. I use that loosely because it's really not so much, but it was a retelling of Rapunzel, and I almost said Tangled. Thanks, Disney. And it's very interesting. I just thought her dynamic with the characters was really cool, and she's a great character. So I definitely like this one probably second after Cinder. Again, with there are so many perspectives. Because in this one you have Cinder's, you have Kai, you have occasional perspective of some of the lunar characters. You have, you know, Scarlet, you have Thorn and Cress, And it just, I mean, there's so many different characters and different perspectives that it's like every chapter you're switching perspectives, which to me slows down a book. And so I thought that we're getting a little overboard there, and I'm a little worried when winter comes out that it's going to be just super, super choppy. But I still enjoyed this book a lot, and I'm still enjoying the series and plan to continue on. So if you have not read the Lunar Chronicles, you should pick them up because they're definitely interesting reads. And that is the last one. So I read, what, 5 books in November? So that's pretty good for me. I was pleasantly surprised. I enjoyed everything I read this month. Definitely Ready Player One was the most exciting and the one that I would probably consider rereading because I enjoyed it so much. I remember while reading it thinking, like, I don't want this to end. The prologue just blew my mind, and once I was finished with the prologue, I was like, I'm gonna love this book. So, yes. And to keep this from turning into just me gushing about Ready Player One for another 15 minutes, I'm gonna end it there. But I hope you guys are having a good start to your holiday season, and I will see you later. Bye!